The system forced me to act like a little son. But I'm a bad girl. Selfish, cold, and lustful. Every time I tried to redeem someone, I couldn't keep up the act. It's not your fault you're being bullied. I'll protect you. Now let me see your legs. Don't be afraid, I'll take you home. Do you have a V-line? Let me touch it. I believe in you. I'm sure you didn't do it. By the way, how many abs do you have? During this redemption period, I took full advantage of the situation. When the task was completed, the system let out a sharp scream. How did my redemption story turn into a romance novel protagonist?
Welcome to listen to my full sweet love series novel. I'm the blogger and I'm Twilight's novel. Now let's start the main story.
I've always been the bad girl in everyone's eyes. Petty, selfish, and self-centered. So when the system asked me to act like a little son, I refused. Now I found myself in a dark alley. The male lead, Jason, was being beaten up and about to collapse. The system was going crazy. This is the most important part. Go save him. The plot can't start without you. I rolled my eyes. Why should I risk my life for a stranger? If I rushed in, Jason would be saved, but I'd be in trouble. What kind of little son is this? More like a big sucker. Ignoring the system's screams, I was about to leave. Just then, Jason groaned and looked up. The moonlight cast shadows on his face. I was stunned by his handsome features. My tone changed, feeling a bit dizzy. Well, maybe it's not so bad to save him. After scaring off the thugs with my phone's police siren, Jason had already passed out from blood loss. I dragged him to the hospital, bought the best medicine and specifically told the doctor not to leave scars. The system was speechless at my sudden change of attitude. It commented sarcastically, "Typical you." When Jason woke up, I was secretly touching his hand while applying medicine. He silently pulled his hand back. "Did you save me?" I clicked my tongue regretfully. "Yeah. It cost me a lot of money." In the plot, Jason's parents died, and he dropped out of high school. His uncle took him in but actually abused him and took over his property. This made Jason twisted and gloomy until he met me, the little son, and was redeemed. My gaze was too obvious, making Jason uncomfortable. "I'll pay you back." The system urged me to take him home while he was vulnerable. I cleared my throat and read my lines. "Those thugs will definitely come back for revenge. Come home with me. I happen to need a bodyguard to repay your debt." Jason interrupted me. "Don't you know? I'm the jinx of this area. Anyone close to me has bad luck." His uncle spread rumors to isolate him. I was indignant. "That's nonsense. Being bullied isn't your fault." But such righteous words didn't suit my personality. After a few sentences, I couldn't keep it up and showed my true colors. "By the way, can I see your legs?" Of course, Jason didn't let me see his legs. He turned his head coldly as if he didn't hear me. At the entrance of the neighborhood, we bumped into someone. The system reminded me. "This is the female lead, Alice. After you heal Jason, they can fall in love normally." Great. So I'm just a middleman. Used and thrown away, becoming part of their play. Alice quickly approached Jason when she saw him. She looked worried and reached out to touch Jason's left cheek. "What happened? Did you get into a fight?" Jason avoided her touch and calmly called her Miss Alice. I was unhappy and stepped between them. "Talk if you have something to say. Why touch him? They can fall in love later. For now, Jason is still the person I saved. I'm selfish and possessive, and my true nature showed again." Alice was startled and looked at Jason for help. But Jason kept staring at me, lost in thought. "Since you're injured, take a few days off from the shop." Seeing that no one paid attention to her, Alice changed the subject. Jason had been working as a mechanic since dropping out of school. Now he worked at Alice's auto repair shop. I impatiently pulled Jason away. Only when we got in the elevator did I turn around to warn him. "You're mine now. You have to listen to me. If I catch you flirting with others, don't blame me for being rude." The system reminded me frantically that I was OOC, but I ignored it. Jason pulled my hand off his arm. He didn't know what to think and said coldly, "You saved me. Do whatever you want. Living together made it easier to complete tasks. Jason was often starved at his uncle's house, sometimes only eating one meal a day. Following the plot, I made soup to nourish him. But I didn't want to spend money, so I bought a bunch of pre-made soup packets. Your uncle is really not human. You've suffered so much. Luckily, I can help you recover now. Jason looked good drinking soup. His fingers were long, his features handsome, and even the veins on his hands were sexy. I couldn't help but touch him again. You're so pitiful. Your hands are so big. My hands are cold. They look perfect for warming. While pretending to blow-dry Jason's hair, my hand quietly rested on his Adam's apple. Wow, your hair is so soft, like a puppy's. Your eyelashes are so long. Knowing Jason was afraid of the dark, I bought a night light. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I and the nightlight will accompany you. Now let me see your V-line. Jason usually pulled his hand back with a cold face, or walked away angrily, slamming the door. But even so, I still took advantage of many opportunities. The system was almost fainting. I asked you to redeem him, not to touch him. You've completely offended the male lead. I didn't care. So what? I just made a mistake that all women make. After recovering, Jason went back to being a mechanic. The system gave me the next part of the plot. Jason's cousin deliberately sent people to cause trouble at the repair shop. To keep his job, Jason endured it but was still framed for stealing money. In the end, Alice stepped in to solve the problem. Sure enough, when Jason came back, the wounds on his back had reopened. While applying medicine, I was furious. They're so bad, framing others without evidence. I cursed them to fall into a sewer on their way home. Jason had been keeping his head down but suddenly looked up. Aren't you going to ask what happened before deciding it's a frame-up? The repair shop surveillance was broken, and several people testified against him. Jason couldn't clear his name because his poverty was well known. Alice compensated for the loss but confirmed Jason's guilt. I blew on Jason's wound sympathetically. Of course, I'll always believe in you. No matter what happens, I'll always stand by your side. Perhaps I blew too hard, making Jason's body stiff. After a while he said, "Got it. Now take your hand off my abs." After that day, Jason seemed more tolerant of me. When I secretly touched his abs and rubbed against his muscles, he just gave me a warning look. Instead of slapping my hand away like before, the more people push me away, the more aggressive I become. Once, I even pinned Jason down on the sofa. My legs wrapped around his waist, and my hands were on his abs. Jason was helpless and said with restrained anger, "Get off when you're done." But this time, I didn't stop. I had taken too much advantage recently and got carried away. My mind went blank, and I actually leaned down to kiss him. After a moment of extreme silence, there was a sudden intense heartbeat. Jason pushed me away abruptly, looking at me in disbelief. Before he could say anything, his face turned bright red. I awkwardly touched my head, feeling guilty and about to apologize. But Jason suddenly stood up. He forgot his phone and didn't look back. He rushed into his room and slammed the door shut. The system and I looked at each other. Is he mad? It's just a kiss. I'll let him kiss me back if he wants. The system rolled its eyes and mocked me. Would that be punishing you or rewarding you? I blushed. Don't say it out loud. I thought Jason would calm down after sleeping. But when I saw him the next morning, I exploded. What do you mean by dressing like this? Who are you guarding against? It was hot, and Jason often wore tank tops or shirts. With the first two buttons undone, his collarbone peeked out, looking incredibly alluring. When he wore tank tops, his arms were strong, and his abs were faintly visible when he bent over. But now, in the middle of summer, he was wearing a jacket buttoned up to the top, not showing an inch of skin. I blushed and insisted, "Aren't you hot like this? Change back to before." I promise not to peek. Jason ignored me and pushed past me to go to work. This went on for several days. My previous tricks didn't work anymore. Every time I got close, Jason avoided me like I was a thief. After being rejected repeatedly, I couldn't take it anymore. I caught Jason outside the bathroom. "What do you mean by avoiding me? It's hurtful to distance yourself like this without explanation." Jason said coldly. You know why? It was just a kiss. What a petty man. Jason pushed me away and walked to his room. I called after him, but he didn't turn around. I finally snapped. Jason, you're such a hypocrite. I had never been so despised, treated like a thief. It made me seem like I was desperate for Jason, like a toad lusting after swan meat. I said angrily, we've already kissed and touched. You're not so pure anymore. Jason paused, then slammed the door shut again. Because of what happened in the morning. I was so angry that I only ate 4 buns, 3 fried dough sticks, and 2 bowls of millet porridge for breakfast. By noon, my anger had subsided, and I clicked my tongue. Even when he's angry, he's still handsome. I excitedly poured takeout into lunchboxes. The system was unusually kind to me. Not bad. Bringing him lunch. Finally remembering you're a little son. I dressed up beautifully and ran out with the lunchbox. When I arrived at the repair shop, it was lunch break. Several mechanics were eating boxed lunches together. Jason wasn't there. When I asked, he was still fixing cars. He's always like this, silent and unsociable. But many people specifically ask for him. He has so much work that he doesn't even rest during lunch, making us look lazy. The tone was sour. It was clear that Jason was being subtly ostracized by his colleagues. When I found Jason with the lunchbox, he was indeed fixing a car, sweat dripping from his sharp brows. Without clothes blocking it, the sweat slowly fell on his well-defined abs. My face darkened. Someone next to me noticed and said, the young lady asked him not to wear a shirt while working. Jason usually keeps to himself but listens to the young lady. Great, at home, he guards against me like a thief. But at Alice's request, he shows off here every day. I felt terrible, furious inside. Jason saw me and looked surprised. He walked over and saw the lunchbox in my hand, his voice softening unconsciously. Why did you come? It's so hot outside. Just then, Alice's coquettish voice came. Jason, are you done? I've reserved a table at Yunji. Let's go. Yunji, a famous high-end restaurant known for its seafood. Seafood feast. My pre-made takeout couldn't compare. I threw the lunchbox on the ground, sneered, and left. The system screamed in my mind. Gentle. Generous. Considerate. Lynn, at least pretend. Whoever wants to be a little son can do it themselves. I quit. I didn't get far before Jason caught up with me. Alice also ran over, covering her nose as if she saw something dirty. The lunch was spilled all over the ground. Alice stood up for justice. Miss Lynn, Jason works hard. How could you bring him this kind of food? What a strong tea flavor. But as a bad girl, I love dealing with tea. Miss Alice, if you care so much about your employees, why do they only get $8 boxed lunches at noon? Alice's face stiffened, and she looked at Jason for help. But Jason didn't look at her, frowning at my sunburned cheeks. Why didn't you bring an umbrella when you went out? Jason raised his hand to shade me from the sun, took his clothes, and led me away. Since I appeared, Jason didn't give Alice a single glance. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alice's body stiffen, her face pale with anger. Haha, the innocent flower is outdated. Fighting for what you want is the trend now. I stood on tiptoe and hooked my arm around Jason's neck. This time, I didn't even bother with the pretense and went straight to the point. You're mine now. What do you mean by showing off to other women? As I spoke, I got angry again and randomly put Jason's jacket on him. Jason was unusually obedient and let me move him around. Miss Alice said this would attract customers and gave me an extra $200 a day. That's why I agreed. This was an explanation, completely different from Jason's previous cold demeanor. But I'm a bad girl who loves to be unreasonable and push my luck. Is that all? I don't believe it. She must have asked you to do other things, right? Jason groaned. While pulling at him, I accidentally undid his belt. My fingers brushed against his tight V-line, slowly moving downward. Jason suddenly pressed my hand against his waist, his voice hoarse. How else do you want to check? Jason's expression was calm, but sweat appeared on his forehead. He seemed sure I wouldn't dare, with no fear in his eyes. I was a bit embarrassed, but being provoked like this, I instantly became competitive and gritted my teeth to touch him. Like this. By the time we finished checking, my face was red, and my legs were weak. Jason half carried me home. Lying in bed at night, I was still savoring it. I sincerely praised. System, the male lead is really... I thought for a while before coming up with a word. Healthy. The system was about to faint from anger and ignored me. After that day, I brought Jason lunch every day. Alice seemed to be competing with me. She ordered high-end restaurant meals for all the employees. Jason's portion was especially generous, with meat overflowing from the bowl. Alice looked worried. Jason, you do physical labor. You need good food. The system said approvingly. This is the female lead. Kind and generous. The employees flattered her and joined in the praise. Alice saw the lunchbox in my hand, her eyes full of pride. But she didn't know that I'm just as good at playing the tea game. I hooked my arm around Jason's neck, and he obediently lowered his head. I bought the ribs early in the morning to make this soup. My hands got burned. I showed my fingers, deliberately looking disappointed. I didn't know someone already brought you lunch. I shouldn't have bothered. Jason's brows furrowed immediately, and he pursed his lips, wanting to take me to buy medicine. Alice didn't give up. Eat first, then go. But Jason ignored her and didn't look back. I sat on a chair while Jason knelt to bandage me. I handed him the lunchbox and took out my own lunch. It was a rice ball. I deliberately said loudly, "The man is drinking $20 rib soup, while the woman eats a $6 rice ball." Jason. After bandaging me, he stood up, his face cold. "Don't bring me lunch anymore." I pulled at Jason a few times, but he ignored me. Is he that angry? Does he like Alice that much? I scoffed. No matter how much he likes her, he's still mine now. As a bad girl, I won't easily give up what's mine. If I don't bring you lunch, what will you eat? Jason said, "I'll come home for lunch from now on." His eyes swept over my fingers and then away. "I'll cook during lunch break. Don't go into the kitchen anymore. That won't do. I still need to get back at her." So every day after Jason came home to cook lunch, I sent him back to work. I took the food he made and went out later. I deliberately ate intimately in front of Alice. Alice was about to be angered to death. Going out in the hot weather was annoying. But seeing Alice's angry face made the meal especially satisfying. I laughed so hard I fell into Jason's arms, taking the opportunity to touch his abs. Jason's face was wooden, already immune to my behavior. I blew in his ear, pretending to be strong. "If you want to eat with your colleagues, go ahead. Don't worry about me. I can eat instant noodles at home." Jason glanced at me. "You'd be unhappy if I really went." Me. The system was dying of laughter. "Do you really think the male lead is stupid? That's the future business tycoon who has connections in both the black and white worlds. Your little tricks aren't enough." I retorted. "So what? It works. I don't care what the future plot is. Jason is mine now, so he's mine. I'm selfish, petty, and vindictive. Trying to take someone from me? Dream on." After Alice found that bringing lunch didn't work, she started thinking of other ways. She deliberately kept Jason overtime every day to create time together. I wasn't willing to lose either and lied that I was afraid of thunder. After Jason coaxed me to sleep, the phone rang again. "That big client specifically asked for you, Jason. You have to come, or you'll lose your job." When Jason got up, I opened my eyes and grabbed him. "Can't you not go? I'm really afraid of thunder." Jason didn't speak, and I got my answer from his silence. I stared at Jason for a long time and kissed his forehead. "Come back early after fixing the car, okay? A kiss means you agree." Jason had been working for years, and his hands were rough and strong from years of labor. But the force holding my face was very gentle. Jason kissed my forehead lightly. "Got it." But that night, Jason broke his promise. He was gone all night and didn't call back once. The system breathed a sigh of relief, overjoyed. The plot is finally back on track. The female lead suddenly had a high fever, and the male lead took her to the hospital and stayed with her all night. This is the beginning of the male and female lead's relationship heating up. Thank goodness. High fever? Took care of her? I covered my ears and hid under the covers. The thunder outside didn't lessen. The system favored the female lead, and Jason also favored her. Logically, I should back off and let them have the stage. But I can't help it. I'm a bad girl. I was forced to do this messy redemption task for no reason. Since I put in the effort, I must get my interest back. If I'm not happy, then no one will be happy. The next day, Jason came back. He had dark circles under his eyes and looked tired, as if he really hadn't slept all night. Jason explained, "There was an emergency at the shop. I didn't mean to not come back." I responded indifferently. That night after dinner, Jason turned on the TV, and the noise came through. But I didn't look at it and kept playing games with my head down. Instead, Jason paused with his arms open. This was the drama I had been chasing recently. Usually, I would use all kinds of methods to snuggle into Jason's arms and make him watch with me. Don't like it? I'll change it. Jason pursed his lips and looked at me. But I didn't respond and just said I didn't want to watch before going into my room. Lying in bed, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Alice. The most important person is by your side at your most vulnerable moment. The picture was in the hospital. Alice looked pale but spirited, with a hint of provocation in her eyes as she looked at the camera. Really? Is she addicted to playing the innocent flower? I sneered and didn't indulge her. Then I wish you many more years like this. Oh, by the way, I heard you had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius last night. I wonder how many more days you can last like this. Alice was choked by me and got angry. At least someone was there for me when I needed it. Unlike someone who waited all night for nothing. It's really pitiful. The system clicked its tongue. Why are you competing with the female lead? The male lead will leave immediately when she calls. Sure enough, the ring came through the door crack. After a while, Jason came in. I need to go to the shop. The client is in a hurry. He looked at me and added, I'll come back after handling it. At the latest, 10 o'clock. I hummed in response and waited for a while, but Jason didn't leave. I looked up in confusion. Jason was staring at my face. His usually cold expression looked a bit unnatural now. He pursed his lips and said out of nowhere, "No kiss this time?" I said, "No. Since you can't keep your promise, I don't bother with these childish actions." Jason hummed and actually looked a bit disappointed. Amidst the urging from the phone, Jason finally left. After a few days of depression, I cheered myself up. Bad girls don't internalize. After pumping myself up, I was back in full force. I continued bringing lunchboxes to show off in front of Alice. This time, it was a plus version. Not only did I bring lunch, but I also made Jason feed me water and wipe my sweat. As long as it made Alice unhappy, I was willing to do anything. I even started treating Jason worse. Before, I at least pretended to be considerate and gentle. Now, I directly treated Jason like a dog. I didn't even bother with excuses. If I wanted to see his legs, I looked. If I wanted to touch his muscles, I touched. I was prepared. If Jason questioned me, I would use the fact that I saved him to justify my actions. But strangely, Jason didn't seem to notice my bullying. Like now when I reached out, Jason naturally grabbed my hand and placed it on his abs. I said angrily, "I want water." Jason's face stiffened, but he handed me the water as if nothing happened. Alice was about to grind her teeth to pieces next to us. The system reminded me, don't provoke the female lead. She's not someone who will tolerate it. Sure enough, Alice soon fought back. That day, when I came out after washing my hands, I bumped into Jason and Alice together. The two stood in a hidden corner, shaded by trees. I was startled and first observed their actions. Good, no hugging or kissing, with some distance between them. I sneaked over and hid to listen to their conversation. Alice's voice was soft and pitiful. "Jason, Lynn doesn't care about you at all. The food she brings you isn't made by her. It's pre-made soup packets, bought in bulk for a few dollars a bag." Jason hummed in response, and Alice seemed encouraged to continue. "Also, if she really cared about you, she wouldn't make you run back and forth every noon and make you do the laundry and mop the floor. You're already tired enough from work." I was furious and said sarcastically to the system, This is the female lead you favor? Spreading rumors behind my back and talking bad about others. Is this what you call kind and generous? The system tried to defend itself. This isn't bad-mouthing. There are no harsh words. Isn't this what you usually do? But soon the system was proven wrong. Because Alice's voice came next, with very harsh words. Lynn is selfish, stingy, spoiled, narrow-minded, and petty. Other than her face, she has no redeeming qualities. She's not worthy of you. I was so angry my head was about to explode. The system tried to stop me but couldn't. I clenched my fists and was about to rush out. But then, a voice stopped me. The sun was high, and the environment was hot. But Jason's voice was clear and calm. I heard his response. Lynn is cautious, thrifty, smart, clear about love and hate, and brave. Jason refuted each point and paused before adding, and very beautiful. Your evaluation is unfair. If you can't say it to someone's face, you shouldn't say it behind their back either. That day, I didn't wait for Jason to take me home. I went back alone. Actually, what Alice said wasn't that harsh. I've heard much worse things before. Like when I refused to buy a house for my brother. My father slapped me, and my mother called me a cold-blooded bitch. Or when I set up a stall to earn tuition. A middle-aged man who didn't get a bargain pointed at my nose and said I was petty and would be poor all my life. It's hard to raise a well-mannered, gentle, and elegant girl in a poor family. No money, no love, no companionship, only scolding and beatings. Most people would become insecure, sensitive, cowardly, and endure in silence. But a few would become extreme like me. Fiery, cold, selfish, and vindictive. So the system made a mistake by choosing me to be the little son. I told the system, I don't want the second male lead you arranged for me in the plot. I don't want to be the little son who burns herself to dedicate herself to others and then gets paired off in the end. I'm good at scheming and never make deals that don't benefit me. If you want me to do something, you have to pay interest. And now, I'm here to collect. Jason, since you said those things and I heard them, don't blame me for not letting go. I want you to love me, and I want you to be unable to leave me. That night, Jason came home from work. I watched him change clothes, cook, and make soup. On the surface, Jason still looked cold. But his hands trembled slightly, almost mistaking sugar for salt. He told me to go watch TV first and come back later to wash my hands and eat. I leaned against the kitchen counter and suddenly said, Jason, change jobs. The figure in the kitchen froze. I continued on my own. I don't want you to fix cars anymore. You're always working overtime and have no time to spend with me. I didn't want Jason to see the female lead anymore. Nor did I want them to have any further connection. So, the simplest solution was for Jason to change jobs. During this time, Jason had been very obedient to me and indulged me a lot. I thought he would agree without hesitation. But he didn't. Jason paused and continued chopping vegetables. There are snacks I brought back on the coffee table. If you're hungry, have some first. Besides the snacks, there was also a box next to it. Inside was the same hairpin as the female lead in the drama I'd been watching recently. It cost 800 yuan, and I was planning to buy a cheaper version online. But the one in the box was clearly the real deal. I'd casually mentioned it, and Jason had remembered. I didn't reach for it. I don't want gifts, Jason. Don't change the subject. After a long silence, I heard Jason's reply. I'm sorry, but I can't quit this job. That night, it was like our roles had reversed. Jason tried to pull me, but I turned and slammed the door shut. The system mocked me. Don't even think about changing the plot. The male lead can't quit his job. Just behave yourself. You're overestimating your abilities. I closed my eyes, but Jason's words still echoed in my mind. Why can't he? Why shouldn't he? The system's words were even more ridiculous. I'm a bad girl. How could I possibly behave myself? The next morning, I still ignored Jason during breakfast. At noon, I didn't bring him lunch either. Alice specifically texted me. What's wrong? Did you two fight? She pretended to be concerned, but I could hear the glee in her tone. I was already furious, and she happened to walk right into it. I sent her a barrage of greasy middle-aged man memes. Alice was so disgusted she kept calling me crazy. When Jason came home from work, he instinctively looked for me as soon as he walked in. But I ignored him, pressing the remote control so hard it almost broke. He walked over and suddenly handed me a stack of things. These are all my bank cards. The password is the day we first met. Jason had probably never had to comfort anyone before, so his tone was a bit stiff and unnatural. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was handing me a butcher's knife instead of bank cards. I don't have a degree or education. I can't work at a big company or find a good job. The TV was still on, but I couldn't hear what the actors were saying. Jason knelt down and pursed his lips as he looked at me. Fixing cars is the only thing I know how to do right now. I've built up a client base and can support myself. I'm not ignoring what you said, but I signed a 3-year contract. If I leave early, the penalty is too high. The neighborhood we lived in was an old one. The windows weren't soundproof, and I could hear the howling wind outside. I want to save up some money, move to a better place, and buy a car. Your skin is delicate, and you always get sunburned when we go out. I'll try to learn more things. When the contract is up and I have some savings, I'll look for other opportunities. Making mistakes comes with a cost. I want to take my time and prepare carefully. I knew Jason would rise to great heights in the future. The system also said the male lead was only poor now but would achieve great success later. But Jason didn't know that. Quitting his job meant uncertainty and instability. He didn't know what the future held. He could endure hardship himself, but now he had me by his side. I'm sorry, Lynn. I hope you can give me a little more time. Jason's dark eyes reflected my face. I must have looked stupid and dumbfounded, because Jason's eyes couldn't hide a trace of pity and tenderness. I turned my head away, trying to cover it up. I'm not forcing you to quit. Fix cars if you want. I'm not a child. I don't need someone to spend time with me all day. I was completely contradicting my earlier pitiful act. But Jason didn't laugh at me. He kissed my wrist and said seriously, "Thank you for believing in me." If he couldn't quit his job, then I'd have to find another way. The system said the male and female lead's relationship deepened because the male lead saved the female lead's life. After that, they fell in love, and the male lead gained the female lead's family's approval. And the male lead would realize that his feelings for me were just gratitude, while the female lead was his true love. That's all nonsense. I refuted every word the system said. What gratitude? Would gratitude lead to kissing and touching abs? And the whole saving someone's life leads to love thing? If that's the case, then the female lead is the type who falls in love with her doctor, her military instructor, and the police officer who helps her. The system was furious. That's because you added your own scenes. The original plot didn't have any of this nonsense. And kissing is just a form of greeting. It's very common abroad and doesn't mean anything. The system's ID was 111, probably because it had been single for too long. It didn't understand romance at all. I deliberately twisted its words. A greeting? So you're saying I can do that to you too? Before the system could respond, I softened my expression and said in a gentle tone, 111, you know what? I actually rely on you a lot. I came to this world and can only depend on you. You're my most trusted existence. My eyes were wet, and my tone was sincere. I usually argue with you, but it's just because I want to hear your voice. I've always felt insecure, and only when you're here do I feel at ease. You'll always protect me, right? I blew a kiss into the air. 111. It's okay if you don't like me. I still like you. Even if you favor the female lead, it's fine. As long as you're willing to talk to me, I'm happy. The air seemed to freeze for a moment. After a long time, the system's voice finally came through. It was clearly trying to hold back, but it still sounded a bit flustered as it scolded me. Don't use the same tricks you use on the male lead on me. I smiled but didn't say anything. After a while, the system spoke again, its tone stiff. And I never said I disliked you. In the park, I hid behind a big tree. The weeds were overgrown, and mosquitoes were everywhere. I was being bitten so badly I begged the system to help me. The system scoffed and said I was making trouble for myself. But soon, I felt a chill run through my body. The mosquitoes that had been biting me suddenly stopped and then fled from me in a frenzy. Before I could celebrate, The smell on my body made my head hurt. What did you do? The system said, menthol oil. I sniffed my arm suspiciously. How much did you use? Why does it smell so strong? The system's voice was stiff, but I could hear a hint of amusement. It's you. It added, I turned you into menthol oil. Works well, doesn't it? My vision went black. Just as I was about to argue with the system, the person I'd been waiting for finally appeared. Alice stood not far away. She seemed to be waiting for someone, looking eagerly toward the entrance. The male lead is about to arrive. This counts as the male and female lead's first date. This park's lake is known as the Lake of Love. Almost every couple in the area has walked here. The female lead will accidentally fall into the lake, and the male lead will save her. Oh my God! So romantic. What kind of date was this? It was just Jason and Alice meeting a client here. And the Lake of Love? If walking here meant love, then the park staff would be guilty of at least 100 counts of bigamy. The system kept chattering, even trying to persuade me. Why don't you leave? If you go back now, you can still catch Crazy Thursday. I stared at Alice, my tone sinister. Little mouth. The system shut up and finally settled down. The plot soon began. Alice dropped something, and when she bent down to pick it up, she slipped and fell into the lake. I quickly called the person I'd arranged to save her. But the person on the other end stammered, sounding guilty. Sorry, it's rush hour. I'm stuck in traffic. I was so angry I almost passed out. Alice fell into the water and immediately started struggling in panic. She screamed for help, but the area was remote, and no one was around. I gritted my teeth and rushed out like a cannonball. Water splashed everywhere as I landed next to Alice. By the time I managed to pull her out, Alice was already starting to lose consciousness. After being rescued, she spat out some water and immediately burst into tears. Her arms were wrapped around me so tightly I couldn't pull them off. She kept crying and wouldn't stop, which only made me more annoyed. I covered her mouth with my hand and scolded her. Stop crying. You're crying all your good luck away. Alice nodded frantically, promising she wouldn't cry anymore, so I let go. She took a few deep breaths, then looked up at me, her tone awkward. You saved me? Obviously. If it wasn't me, who else would it be? Alice's eyes were wet, her face red, and she said shyly, I didn't expect you to save me. You always seem to dislike me. So you... What was with her tone? Why did it sound so flirtatious? I suddenly felt something was off. My gaydar was going off. Was the female lead really the type to fall in love with whoever saved her? If the male lead saved her, she'd love him. If I saved her, she'd love me. But I'm not into girls. I spoke quickly. I'm just an ordinary college graduate, not from a top school, and I'm not planning to go to grad school. Alice's face turned redder, and I grew more panicked. Maybe you should just like Jason. I wouldn't dare leave a college kiss on you. We have no future together. Just as I was sweating bullets and about to run away, Alice's face turned bright red, and she finally finished her sentence. Can you take me to the hospital? I'm allergic to menthol oil. At the hospital, I sat outside the ward. I patted my chest and let out a long sigh. So it was just an allergy. I scared myself for nothing. Jason arrived half an hour later. As soon as he saw me, he frowned and asked urgently if I was hurt. I shook my head, but Jason didn't believe me. They said you and Alice fell into the water together. Did something happen? Did she bully you? I said. We didn't fall in together. I saved her. I'm amazing. I pulled her out all by myself. But Jason didn't feel reassured by my words. He checked me over with a cold face, ignoring me when I tugged on his sleeve. I felt inexplicably guilty. I'm fine, aren't I? I knew what I was doing. Saving someone wasn't that dangerous. I couldn't just ignore someone falling into the water. Even as I said this, I still felt a bit scared thinking back on it. I'm not a strong swimmer, which is why I'd arranged for someone else to save Alice. As I rambled on, the system's voice suddenly spoke in my mind. You wouldn't have been in danger, I said, confused. Huh? The system explained. I wouldn't have let anything happen to you. I was watching the whole time. It paused, its tone stiff. You said before that I'd protect you. Wait, was this the same cold, sarcastic system I knew? It sounded like it had been poisoned by cheap takeout. After Alice woke up, she asked to see me. Jason stood in front of me, insisting on coming along. He was a bit on edge and didn't want to leave my side. I comforted him for a long time before he finally agreed to wait outside the ward. Alice lay in the hospital bed, her face pale. Speak. You saved me. What do you want? There was no trace of the earlier embarrassment when I had rescued her. Alice lifted her chin slightly, exuding the familiar air of arrogance. You owe me for this outfit, the taxi fare, and today's lunch. Alice nodded, looking at me, and suddenly said, I thought you'd ask me to stop liking Jason. I shook my head. No need. Feelings cannot be controlled or demanded. I couldn't make Alice stop liking Jason. She couldn't control it, and neither could I. My earlier rivalry with her was just because her one-sided affection and clumsy tactics amused me. I was bored, and her provocations gave me something to do. But if Jason crossed the line first and started flirting with Alice, I would leave immediately, without a second glance at Jason. Alice stared at me for a long time before looking away. The person who took me to the hospital when I had a high fever wasn't Jason. He was stuck at a client's house because of the heavy rain. I lied to you about the hospital. I was stunned for a moment before I realized what she was referring to. I'm sorry for lying. Alice's face turned red, a mix of shame and embarrassment. She awkwardly changed the subject. Besides that, what else do you want as repayment? I thought for a moment. Then cover my dinner too. Alice was incredulous. That's it. I nodded. That's it. She was instantly flustered. Lynn, is my life only worth a few outfits and meals? Of course not. There's also the taxi fare. But seeing Alice on the verge of fainting, I decided to spare her and didn't say it. As I turned to leave, I suddenly heard another, I'm sorry from behind. I turned back. Alice didn't avoid my gaze this time, looking directly at me. Compared to her earlier stammering and embarrassment, this apology was particularly solemn and serious. I'm sorry. Jason was right. One-sided evaluations are unfair. What I couldn't say to your face, I shouldn't have said behind your back. Alice was very earnest. Lynn, you're brave, resilient, and kind. You're a good person. After leaving the ward, Jason immediately grabbed my wrist. The system hesitated. With this rescue, the entire plot is messed up. How will the male and female leads get together now? I countered. Then, what defines the male and female leads? Paper-thin characters in reality are flesh and blood. Life has many crossroads, and we meet many people. A single thought can completely change the outcome. I asked Jason, why did you fall for me? Was it because I saved you, or because of the companionship afterward? I gave Jason two choices, but he said neither. His kiss landed on my hair, and I knew the answer. Just as it's hard to pinpoint when I fell for Jason. The encounter in the alley, the fleeting eye contact. The line between lust at first sight and love at first sight seems particularly blurred. Jason, isolated and gloomy, had been treated as a curse by everyone since childhood. He couldn't understand why someone could express their affection for him so passionately and directly. He also didn't understand why someone, knowing his past, would care so little and only seek closeness. Pity and heartache inadvertently pricked his sensitive pride. The pure love and desire directed solely at him felt especially genuine. By the time Jason realized it, he was already unable to break free. The heavens like to play jokes, but in the end, lovers always get their wish.